Hi, this is Ted Barsley with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, look for us online at alamopianogalleries.com. And please do subscribe and like this video, like our other videos, and subscribe to our channel. We're looking to build up our not readership, viewership, listeningship. Here's where I'm at today. We have internationally one of the most prolific piano composers, performers, Dennis Alexander. And I'm really thrilled and honored to meet this guy because the first thing I told him today, I said, he's has lived and continues to live what I thought was my dream job. As I started serious piano studies like 7th and 8th grade, and then within a year or so, I thought, you're never gonna make it because it's just so much discipline. Thank you for being here. It's just such a pleasure to meet you. I'm really, really thrilled. And as I mentioned before, to some extent, I feel like I'm kind of out of my league interviewing you because of your just great amount of work that you've done for education and you continue to do for education and to push the piano, promote piano, and also at the same time, beautiful music. Not the kind of music that, I'm not going to name composers, but when you listen to it, there's some piano music that just makes people not like the piano. And I'm being nice with the lines, but yours is just absolutely beautiful and wonderful. And
thank you.
There's so many things, I don't know what to talk about. I mean, you're commissioned from the Royal Conservatory of Music. And then there's these other things, the Celebration Series, and they're all wonderful. And you've been telling me about them. Then it all starts back in a small town in Kansas. Yes. And so that's where you had talked about. And then why don't you pick it up from Kansas and go real brief? You mentioned you went from here to there, your education. But what I want to do is I want to focus in on when the writing of the piano, the pedagogy books, and when the compositions came in to where you were publishing instructional books.
So you want me to start in Kansas?
Okay, how about when you leave Kansas after
about 40 or 50 years?
Yeah. Okay, how about after you had finished your tenureship there? You said you taught for a couple of years.
Okay. Well, I've been very fortunate in my life. I had a position at the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana. And I was teaching piano pedagogy, piano performance, and I was a performer. My degree was in piano performance. I never studied composition. It never even occurred to me that one day I might, become a composer of educational music. But I was teaching piano pedagogy and piano performance and loved it. I was also teaching advanced functional piano skills to piano majors. I played by ear myself, and when I was growing up, I was fortunate that I had a piano teacher who never discouraged me from playing by ear. And when I was in college, I played in a nightclub for 4 years, every Friday and Saturday night, a private dinner club. So I took requests, and it was fun for me.
I bet that was a blast.
I was one of those weird classical pianists who could also play by ear.
That's a rarity.
It's rare.
It's a rarity.
Yeah, and I improvised. I played by ear. So I had those particular skills. When I was back in 1986, one of the co-authors of Alfred's basic piano library. Her name, she was from Texas. Okay. In fact, both of those authors, Willard Palmer was from Houston, Amanda Vick Lethco was teaching at the University of Texas, Austin. And they, along with Morty Manis, who was the owner and president of Alfred, had put this piano method together. It was really taking off in the early 80s, and Amanda Vick was in Montana giving a workshop, and she asked me if I could possibly have time to drive her up to Glacier National Park, which unfortunately I didn't have time to do, but I did have time to take her to dinner. And over dinner, Amanda Vick looked at me and she said, being a Southern lady, she was from Mississippi, a real Southern accent, she called everybody honey. Uh-huh. And she looked across the table and she said, honey, she said, Willard Palmer and I would like to have you help us market this course. It's really taken off, and we need, we'd like to have a young man, maybe from the university, talk to these teachers and promote it. And I was very intimidated by the thought of doing this because everybody knew Amanda Vick Lefkoe. I mean, everybody knew Willard Palmer. Nobody had ever heard of Dennis Alexander from University of Montana. But I ended up flying out to Los Angeles, met with Morty. It was just wonderful. They hired me to do workshops all over the country that first summer, and they went well, and teachers were receptive to having one of their non-authors doing the workshop for them. Well, then that first summer, Morty Manis and his wife took me to lunch after a workshop and said, we need to have duet books to go along with the method. Willard doesn't have time to write them. Would you be able to do that? And my first response was, Morty, I've never written a thing in my life. And he said, really? He said, why not? I said, well, to be honest, nobody ever asked me. I'm a performer. I'm a performing classical pianist. I do a lot of work with other musicians, chamber music. I was doing a lot of work with a violinist, piano-violin duo. And that was my life, and I loved it. I was very happy. And so I said, I can do that.
That's an intriguing concept.
I knew I could do this. I just hadn't ever thought about doing it before. And so he said, well, Willard needs to supervise or approve everything that you write. So I wrote the first book, turned it in. Willard loved it. He said, I don't want to change a thing. And that's where my career began so unexpectedly. And then this was back in 1986. Alfred was very small at the time, not anything like it was later. But the only other composer with Alfred at the time was Willard Palmer.
Oh, wow.
And then shortly after that, he brought Lynn Freeman Olson, was a very, very respected and well-known pedagogical composer, on board. And sadly, Lynn developed cancer later and passed away. Then it was just me. And that's where
that's when the workload picked up.
I mean, I was kind of at the right place at the right time. And Morty offered me, he needed to have a lot of music in a rather short amount of time. And he was very, very supportive and actually offered me advance royalties to write for him. He wanted a collection every month. And I said, I can't do it if I'm working full time. And that's when he offered me advance royalties if I would go half time at the university work for him the other half. So for the first year, that's what I did. So I got a number of books out all within 1 year. And that's really how my career took off as an educational composer.
Wow. And so it looks like these other things that you had, the commission, you wrote a whole series of books for there too. So like something 20 books, different levels of repertoires for different students for the Royal Conservancy.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about in my own personal library.
Yeah.
I have collections and sheet music solos at every level.
Right.
From beginning right through early advanced.
When you write a piece, do you know you're writing it for a certain level, or do you have like do you have any pieces that are like at this level, this level, this level, this level, where different versions edited to where younger players could play them? Like for example, Scott Joplin's The Entertainer.
Okay.
There's the little baby version, and there's a little bit Big Brother, and then there's a big one. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have?
I have a few pieces like that. One that comes to mind immediately is a piece called Touch a Rainbow.
Okay.
That was originally a late elementary piano solo. In fact, that particular solo was also chosen to be featured in a movie.
Okay.
Elle Fanning, at the time child actress, she's grown up now.
Grown up, yeah.
Dakota Fanning's little sister. Was starring in this movie. The movie is called Reservation Road. It starred Joaquin Phoenix and Jennifer Connelly and Mark Ruffalo.
This sounds real familiar.
Reservation Road.
Yeah, it was a pretty big movie.
It's kind of a tragic story, but in the movie, Elle is playing in a piano recital about halfway through the movie, and they wanted a piece that would reflect, the the moment, I guess, so to speak. And the producer went to a teacher there in the Los Angeles area that he knew, and she pulled out about 200 different pieces for him to look through. And lo and behold, he chose "Touch a Rainbow" as one of my pieces. So Al played this little piece on a piano recital as part of the movie. And then it became so popular that teachers wanted a duet arrangement of it at an intermediate level, and then they wanted a more advanced arrangement of it. So I put that into a book called Especially for Adults, a little more advanced level. So that's one example.
You're telling me this story, and I'm thinking how many times I've heard this song played at recitals. The minute you said "Touch a Rainbow," I said, wait a minute, that's come up at the recitals at the store, like more than once. And I didn't know it was in a movie, but for you, that's got to be a thrill.
Well, it was fun.
You have a Hollywood people playing your song, and it's a little snippet in the film.
Well, it was very sweet, really. And I wish it would happen more often.
Well, you're contributed to the soundtrack, right?
Yeah.
So, that's absolutely wonderful. Now, I wanted to ask you the other thing about like when you write, and I know you told me you traveled and like for business and for personal stuff like that. And I know as a pianist and certainly a musician and a composer, which you've become, and I like the idea that you are a classically trained pianist and never even thought about writing anything or doing anything, let alone you played, Friday, Saturday nights in clubs where there's no written music, so you're just kind of improvising and going with the flow with the band and whoever else is there, or just because I don't know if you played solo or with other musicians, probably both, I'm sure, but you're putting something together in your head all the time, all right? Whether you're riding in a car, or, rather than get bored, it's easier to like write a song or play a song until you start thinking of variation. What's the most exotic, not weirdest, but the most exotic location where you kind of put something together and thought, this is a song, and then you sat down and made notes or did something so you could remember it?
Well, one piece that just really comes to mind, because I used to travel a lot more than I do now. I've given workshops all over the world for teachers and students. And so I've spent a lot of time in airplanes. And sometimes I might have a deadline coming up and I'm on an airplane.
Nothing like a deadline, that's so funny.
I'm not even close to a piano. But fortunately, I hear things in my head a lot. Most composers do. And I knew I had a couple of Halloween type pieces that were due real soon, and I wasn't going to get home to the piano in time to make that deadline.
It's time to start writing in your head.
And so I usually always traveled with staff paper, and I got this tune in my head, and the words were coming out. And there was a piece called Pumpkin Boogie. And I wrote it years ago. And it ended up, strangely enough, being one of the biggest selling solos in my entire library. And it still sells today. I think I wrote it maybe in the late 80s or early 90s. And, but the words were catchy and worked with the music. And a lot of kids like boogie types of pieces, and in fact, teachers do too. So that's maybe one of the more exotic.
Right. So we put one together on a plane. That's pretty neat. I also know I haven't asked a whole lot of questions, and I'm sure you're familiar with your own story. So I'm going to ask you your story. When you first started out composing, I know you just mentioned you had staff paper. So your job there when you were composing music was actually done by hand. However, over the years, there's been technological breakthroughs that really have made your job a lot easier. And it probably increased your productivity and made it easier to accomplish, like, they need 30 pieces for this and that. On top of the seminars and in the workshop that you teach, you get a room full of teachers. This is how this works, and you teach them how to use the books.
Right.
What do you use? How do you put a song together? I mean, like when you start off, you created it. Where do you go next?
Okay. Well, I have a clavinova in my office. It's hooked up to a Mac desktop.
Okay.
I use a notation program called Sibelius.
That's
and today Sibelius and Finale are the two main
Pretty main ones.
industry standards. In fact, Hal Leonard Publishers uses Sibelius exclusively, and Alfred has always used Finale.
Okay.
And other publishers that mostly have used Finale. But Sibelius has really become very, very popular, and it's a little easier to learn, I think, than Finale. At least for me, it was. So I would use the clavinova, of course, to input the notation.
Right.
Once I had everything inputted, the wonderful thing about some of this technology is if you're writing, for instance, a piece that's an ABA form, you can select, once you have the A section written, you can copy and paste it in, so you don't have to rewrite it all in longhand.
Absolutely.
And that really saves time, and it's a godsend, really. And if you write a piece and you decide, I really want to put this in E flat major instead of C, you can tell the score to transpose it, or tell the computer to transpose it to another key. And so there's just all kinds of things that have made the life of a composer
easier,
much easier. I look back on the days of Beethoven and Mozart. I'm in awe.
Extraordinary amount of physical work.
Awe of what they were able to do by hand.
Mm-hmm.
It
really is.
Orchestral scores and
piano
scores and the music that Franz Liszt wrote.
There's some accuracy problems with that too, but at the same time, it is really, really amazing.
Yeah.
And the materials they had, I don't care whether they were one of the migrant composers or one of the wealthiest composers, the materials just weren't really that good back then.
Exactly.
I mean, the ink's blood. It was not good. It was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough work.
Yeah.
Now, when you had mentioned the way that you teach and students, and another thing that has changed, at least since like forever to now, is that you're learning piano, and digital pianos now come with built-in metronomes, and I don't know if anyone really uses a metronome, because alongside the metronome there's a drum machine. And what are your thoughts on using something with a groove or a beat as opposed to just a... Because all that music we play starts on one now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part about learning the rhythms.
I have several thoughts on that. As I mentioned a minute ago, I have a clavinova in my studio, and I'm teaching adults today at all levels. I've got students who are sheer beginners, and I have early intermediates. I've got intermediate. I've got advanced, and everything in between. All of them need, I think, even greater attention to rhythm. Rhythm is just the life force of music. And I think most students find it challenging to practice and stay with the metronome.
I'll be the first one to admit that.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. I hated
that was
the
hard
metronome.
for you?
Yeah, it's easier to think like a drummer.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have students who, if I had the metronome going, even just the one to build in to the clavinova, even if there's a ding on beat one, if they're hearing ding, 2, 3, 4, ding, 2, they might hear the ding, and then they get off on beats 2, 3, and 4, and they're just not even aware of the constant and steady ticking. But then if I use one of the drum patterns in one of the style accompaniments and put that on, and all of a sudden they're hearing yum da 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 yum da 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 da. Yeah, it's much easier for them to feel that rhythm and stay with a steady pulse. So I use some of that technology on my clavinova a lot. I have an adult student who loves Latin music, and she's a strictly classical pianist. She's been playing for years and years and years. I've had her for a student now. She's a retired professor at the university. I've had her for about 14 years now. And her husband loves jazz, but she's never played anything except Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Chopin, Rachmaninoff. So she decided that she wanted to play some jazz. Well, my goodness sakes, and she's never been really, really strong rhythmically. But when she started doing some jazz pieces, that was really a challenge for her to get the rhythmic syncopation and all that. And then she wanted to get into some more Spanishy types of pieces lately. So I have a piece of mine. It's called Tango a la Mango. It's from a collection called Splash of Color. Mm-hmm. And so tangos, are very, very rhythmical, extremely rhythmical pieces. So she thought she really had her rhythm down, and she didn't. I brought her in from the grand piano. I put her on the clavinova, and I put on a tango rhythm that.
And made her the pianist of the tango band.
Yeah, right. So she's got a band with her, and that was extremely challenging for her to stay with, but she loved it, and it really taught her, I think, much better than if she'd just been playing with a metronome.
Right.
And it was fun at the same time.
Well, what I think is great about the drum machine or rhythm or background tracks is that it preps any student, regardless of their age or their experience, to play music with others, which I think primarily is what drives a lot of people to want to study music in the first place, because then you can be part of something bigger than what you can do by yourself on piano or with a guitar.
In fact, this morning I was giving a workshop for the teachers here at Maxwell, and I was talking about my first piano teacher when I was growing up in Southwest Kansas. And she was fabulous. She, almost every lesson I went to, she sat down on the piano bench and made up, and she played by ear, she would make up secondo, a teacher accompaniment, to go along with my simple little pieces.
Right.
And it was fantastic for me because I learned to listen to something else besides my part.
Right.
I learned to keep going no matter what. How important rhythm was. She was teaching me choreography at the piano because I had to imitate her movements and her opening gestures and her closing gestures, and mostly it was just a lot more fun. So having that ensemble experience as a child, as a beginner, to me is extremely important in piano teaching, and for me it was really the beginning of my love of chamber music and accompanying, and performing with singers, and I had the great joy of doing a Carnegie Hall debut with a violinist back in 1987, because we had done so much work together with the violin and piano repertoire, which I love dearly. So I always thank my first piano teacher for giving me that love of making music together and with others. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. When you were first talking about putting your pieces together on a clavinova, and you had mentioned A, B, B, A form, have you ever taken like one of each of those, bumped it up, modulated maybe a third, minor third up, or major third down, so you get a modulation and then go back to it?
Oh yeah.
At what point do you put those in? A little bit past intermediate, like a key change to go back? Because it's not really like you're writing anything new, but you're bumping it.
You can do those things at an elementary level.
Okay.
Of course, you have to be careful that sometimes elementary students haven't had very many key signatures yet.
Right, that's what I was getting.
But you can use accidentals
and do the same thing.
And do the same thing in a very simple manner. But I like to write music at the elementary level, especially late elementary level, that has all kinds of harmonic surprises, unexpected things. This is what really generates enthusiasm, not only I think with audiences when they're listening, but for the students who are practicing. Students practice most the pieces they like.
Right. Well, that's absolutely true.
Forever. That's the case. And it might be a teacher's favorite piece, and if the student doesn't like it, they're not going to practice it that much. But if they love a piece, they're going to
wear it out.
They're going to wear it out.
They're going to wear it out.
So I like to write pieces that are interesting, that have harmonic surprises in them. I like to write pieces that sound harder than they actually are. Not all students have a lot of time to practice. So some of them need to have pieces that make them sound terrific with a minimal amount of practice.
And I know that you work into your compositions, something I had mentioned earlier when we were talking. And this is the part that I absolutely love about people that compose for instructional books and educational student books. They do the quirky things with the fingerings, where the song goes like this, and what they're doing with the melody and everything changes, but it falls to a classical thing where they have to kind of get a little bit different, tricky with the fingering than what the song's taken up to there, or a little twist and a turn that's different from the rest of the piece.
Yeah.
Do you have those come to you naturally, or do you have to go in there and kind of fool around and find those for a little bit? I mean, how do you write those? Because sometimes you're playing, it's like, you listen to Bach. Yeah. And it's like, he's got a great song. Then he starts going quirky. He's like, how did he come up with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not really a different note, but he messed that timing up so bad that you got to really concentrate to get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those, you do sit down and structure those, correct? Or am I wrong?
Well, because I'm an improviser.
Right. A lot of that comes naturally.
Most of the time, when I'm writing something, I hear it in my head first. I know what I want. Once in a while, after I write something, I'll go back in and revise it and play with it.
Right.
A little bit, either rhythmically or melodically. Right. It's rather rare that my first take
has all that in it.
Ends up being the final.
Right.
Once in a while that does happen, and it's wonderful when it does.
Right. You don't have to go back and think, right? It just came out.
Yeah. But it's often the case, and again, that's where the technology is so lovely to have.
It captures it.
Because we don't have to start from the beginning and then rewrite the whole piece, just because there were 4 or 6 measures that you wanted to do something different, and just change a little tiny bit. So that's one of the real advantages today of having nice notation programs, where you can make those kinds of changes. You were asking about this technology earlier, and I just remembered that when I first started writing for Alfred music in 1986, all of our music was engraved in Korea.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You sent sheets off to engravers.
Yeah, because it was much cheaper to have engravers over there.
Well,
and they would engrave it by hand, and so the music was I'd send something in, and they'd say, well, now in a couple of weeks we'll get it back, from Korea, and then it's a second proof, so you'll need to go over that really carefully, and then we'll send it back to Korea, and then get the final product. Today, of course, I could literally engrave it myself,
right,
through the notation program, and Alfred might fine tune it a little bit, but it's much easier today to get things done rapidly than it was back in the 80s when they were sending things to foreign countries.
I have never seen in my life. I have never seen a music typesetter. They're like a complicated typewriter, and it goes across, and you type in music. And when I was growing up, you get a music book. If it was one of those where they really tried to get 24 measures into one page and the spacing isn't there, it's so hard to count slowly when it's all crammed together, because your tendency is to speed up.
Right.
You have a Bach prelude on one page, it's like, you're going to get through it in 30 seconds just because it's on one page.
Yeah.
And the spacing is there. And so psychologically, you have to engrave that thing to where they can they can see the pulse in between. If you can't see that, if that pulse is too small, you can't read it.
And well, not only can you not read it, but you also sure can't sight read it.
Right. That's what I meant.
If you
go through it 15, 16 times, and it's like, And then
Yeah. And if everything isn't just lined up perfectly like it's supposed to be, it's really hard to play a piece if you have dotted eighths and sixteenths in one hand and the left hand is in other rhythms and they're not lined up right. Visually, it's like impossible to sight read things like that.
Right. And my second piano teacher, when she said, "What songs do you want to learn?" And of course, we want to learn what was on the radio. And she'd look at she'd get the music, and it was all crammed up, and we couldn't play it. She would make a simplified version and write it out over a number of pages so you could at least learn a song.
Yeah.
And that helped out so much because it spaced it out, and it's exactly what you just said. Dotted eighth, you can see where it goes against the other one.
Yeah. By the way, I'm just going to throw something in here.
Please do.
I hear, just because of how you were wording this, I hear constantly from piano teachers about songs, quote, that they give their pieces, their students to play. Pianists don't play songs.
Right.
They play pieces. Singers sing songs. And so I'm always finding myself sometimes talking to piano teachers. I see it all the time on social media, where teachers on certain Facebook pages like Piano Teachers Central or the Art of Piano Pedagogy, they'll write in notes, on Facebook or whatever about my students playing a song called, Minuet in G major, and I want to just say, please, it's not a song, it's a piece. It's a composition. Singers sing songs.
Sing songs, and I've often thought like any music that has words is a song.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Any song, any piece of music that has words is a song,
right.
as opposed to something that's just a piece or an instrumental.
Yeah.
And I don't really use correct language when I'm talking about a lot of things, but the idea is that it's a song with words, so someone can go out and sing it.
Right, if they want to. But piano pieces, that are, simple, that have words to them, I don't consider those songs. I still consider those, piano pieces that there are pieces for the piano that have words.
Right. That has happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to do now is I wanted to, you have your website, and on there you have examples of, like, for example, you playing your nocturnes, and then there's instructional commentary and specific notes about that. And then you also have some of your recordings out there, which I had asked you earlier. You do have albums of your own music.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of albums at all, but I do have lots of recordings on via the website, which is DennisAlexander.com.
Okay.
Just so your viewers might know that.
They can buy stuff there from you?
Yes, they can.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
That's
although I encourage teachers everywhere to support your local dealer. If you have a dealer that you are that you like, is close by, go to the store and buy the music from them. I always want to support our local dealers.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
But if they don't have access to a local dealer, yes, you can buy my
stuff online,
my music
straight
right
from
online. I have links through for everything on my website through Sheet Music Plus. But on the website, I have, as you mentioned, I have videos. I have every piece I've ever written. I've got recording for every collection. There are 3 examples, 3 recordings, and along with the music. And so teachers, if they go to the website, they can see examples of the score.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They can hear the piece all the way through in most cases. Every sheet music solo that I've ever written, I've recorded on the website. And there's teaching tips. There's a photo album. They can contact me through the website. I have a lot of
extremely prolific production on your life's work. It's just really amazing.
Thank you.
It really is, and I'm absolutely in love with the nocturnes because I've heard a number of them at recitals, and I just think I mean, when they said you were going to be here, I said, man, this is, I wanted to be a guy like that when I grew up. And then I found out how hard and difficult and how smart you got to get. It's like, nah, I think I'll just make up my own music and play it. It just seemed to be a lot easier than try to formally give someone instructions or to give them a method book where you don't know if you're out of your league, into your league. And the only way you would know that is if you had enough experience in education to know that. And the other thing that I think is fantastic is that I think your natural inclination is by ear, because everything is like, you just feel it, you make it up. It's not like, I'm going to sit down and take this piece and do this to it, because sometimes that's another way to compose and come up with something. But playing by ear and playing by feel, and also, with the rhythmic groove, that's what music is about, because it brings life to life, and you get people to dance and sing as they're walking down the street. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, they're composing things in their head 30,000 feet.
Yeah. When I first started composing, I had so many deadlines that I had to meet, and I'd go to sleep at night, and I literally had staff paper next to the bed.
I can imagine.
I would get something in my mind, a rhythmical motive, or along with a melody that I didn't want to lose, and I could hear the harmonies, and I would wake up at night, I would write down just enough of it so that I would be able to remember what to do the next day when I needed
like a dream pad or whatever they call it. Yeah, dream journal.
And I mean, that went on for months and months and months in the early years. The more years went on and I had more and more things published, I stopped doing that. But I would find myself, if I would taking the dog out for a walk, it sometimes drove me nuts because I would constantly be hearing things in my head that I would want to not forget, or a title would come to me that I really wanted to use, and if the title came, then the music starts coming, and I would sometimes have to cut the walk short with the dog to get home.
Well, the other thing is there's nothing worse than knowing at the moment you made something, you just created a great idea. Yeah. And you lose it before you get home, and you keep going back to that. Well, how did it go? How did it go? How did it go?
Yes.
How did it go?
Yeah.
And you just, it's like, I didn't have an instrument. I couldn't burn it in, bum, 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 whatever it was. And so you're trying to, and then you get really frustrated, and then you tell yourself, never again. I'm walking around. For years, I walked around just because I thought I was a poet with a pen and pad, like a great idea, write it down. And then after a while, you have a bunch of great ideas. Yeah. And I never really walked around like that with music, even though I played a lot, and I thought I was like a guy that could, compose music. And I never walked around with those until after I did nothing but music. Right. And I'm sure you're well aware that when you were teaching at University of Montana, there came a point to where it's like, I can't free my mind up from grading into students and working with students to just trying to liberate to write these pieces. Yeah.
Well, I taught at the University of Montana for 24 years, and I loved every minute of it. But the last 10 years that I was there, I was also working kind of full-time for Alfred. And I found myself teaching at the university all day long, and I'd come home, almost every night. I was at the university for concerts or rehearsals or whatever. Right, so I was at the university from 7 o'clock in the morning until sometimes 9 o'clock at night. And then I'd come home and then, I've got to write 6 pieces tonight or work on a new collection. Yeah. And I would work for Alfred between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning, and then start over the next day. And after doing that for 10 years, I finally decided that I had to go one way or the other. I just couldn't keep doing both.
Right. No, that's understandable.
So then I made the decision to retire from the university, and I moved to California and did exclusively my composing work. Right. And then I also taught a little bit because I love teaching, and I've always taught. But I had some private students I worked with, and along with my composing work. But the schedule was much more relaxed. It freed me to be a little more creative, I think, and just made it easier to be a bit more productive as a composer.
Right. So this workshop you did here at Baxhaw.
Yes.
And this is to present the program to the teachers. How many of these do you do like in a year? Where is this one at? In other words, I'm assuming your pace is slowed down, but here you are
yeah.
presenting a whole course to a whole school or pieces.
This particular occasion, Ken Thompson was kind enough to invite me down. I was here about 10 years ago, and but he wanted to do a pedagogical type of workshop lecture for the teachers, and he chose a lecture called Music in Motion, and it's talking about how we use our bodies when we play the piano, and the importance of keyboard, what I call keyboard choreography.
Right.
Okay, and that was the lecture this morning, and then he wanted a showcase of music, newer things that I've done, so I did that, and then tonight we're having a master class with some very talented students. Looks like a fantastic program. With some really nice variety of repertoire. Some pieces I've never even taught before.
Wow.
Which was really fun.
Oh, that's got to be fun for you.
It's fun for me, and I can't wait to hear the kids play them because they're great pieces. I just haven't, in all the years I've been doing master classes everywhere, I've never had some of these pieces played like we're having this evening.
Oh, wow.
So I really look forward to it. And then tomorrow, he's got, I think, around 40 students in 3 different recitals playing my music at all different levels. So I can't wait.
Oh, that's going to be an exciting day
to
for you.
Yeah.
Dennis Alexander, it's been such a pleasure visiting with you.
Thank you, Ted.
And I honestly wish this was like part 1 of a 4 or 5 part series like Ken Burns, because the wealth of information and experience you have I'm just so totally thrilled. It's just been a wonderful experience having you here on our video channel. And for everyone out there, this is Ted Barsley with Alamo Piano Galleries. We've been visiting with the internationally well-known composer, prolific pedagogical writer, and creator of piano literature and pieces, Dennis Alexander. If you have questions, comments, anything that comes into this channel for you, we're going to bump it over.
Fine.
But if you want to ask an expert, just go to his website and ask him a question. And if you can't find him, come to me and I'll relay it.
And I promise to respond if you write me.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.